Hello, I'm Sarah Mayfield, and I'm going to be discussing chapters 1 and 3 of the Bell, Cohn, and Foster textbook about thesis and dissertations. So, chapter 1 is discussing what is a dissertation or thesis. So, a dissertation is an extended, usually written treatment of a subject, especially one that's submitted for a doctorate. So that's what you're going to see people applying for their PhD or PsyD working on. And then at the graduate level, what we're doing is a thesis, and it's a dissertation embodying results of original research and especially substantiating a specific view, according to the text, and one written by a candidate for an academic degree, in our case for our master's degree. So there are many reasons why we do this. There's one major purpose. Obviously, we needed to graduate. That's the foremost or the obvious reason. There's a lot of other reasons that this is beneficial, not only professionally but personally. A few reasons. So it's going to demonstrate our skill level at conducting independent research, which we can see from this current course is definitely a skill. You're not born with this knowledge. Definitely need to hone it. And it's going to also assess a student's mastery of a specialized area of scholarship. Some even see the dissertation process as an examining mastery of technical aspects of research, including knowledge and ability to apply principles of research design, as we've been discussing in class, and statistics and so on. And it's going to help us to be able to think critically and to synthesize information. I always struggle with that word. Synthesize. There we go. And extend the work of others. So there's going to be many research challenges, but if you look at these as opportunities, it can help to solve conceptual problems, methodological, and practical problems. And it's also geared to increase our respect for empirical research and the hard work that is put into it. And it can also jumpstart our careers as we transition from student to professional, as this will be a published work. So there's a few major differences between thesis and dissertation. I kind of touched on it earlier, but with a thesis, requirements are placed less on emphasis on the requirements are less emphasis on originality. Excuse me. And you're given more guidance and supervision with your thesis as opposed to a dissertation. And students rarely operate as independent like doctoral students do. So traditionally with a thesis, empirical projects are required and quantitative methods have been the majority. However, mainstream psychology research has started mixing some quantitative and qualitative research recently. And as far as the length, there is a lot of variability across degree programs and universities, but according to the text, recent studies have shown that psychology dissertations have an average length of 132 pages, and with a range from 42 to 285. It's quite a range. And dissertations, interestingly enough, have become shorter in the past 15 years. So the text states that this is likely due to the increased acceptability of publication-style dissertations. As far as the format begins with a table of contents and then launches into a literature review. Then there are the methods, results, and discussion section, and at the end, a reference section. And there will be appendices that provide supplemental material at times, such as data recording forms, consent forms, and sometimes raw data. So it's important to take a moment in this process to think about what you're thinking about in terms of your viewpoint of the thesis. So some questions that the text mentions we want to ask ourselves are we excited? Are we overwhelmed? Are we thinking of this as just a requirement we have to meet to get our degree? Or are we seeing it as a way of gaining useful experience and skills during the project? Do we see it as having relevance to the work that we plan after graduation? So, as we know, as psychology majors, the way we think about something greatly affects our level of enjoyment and the level of difficulty and length of time, just overall how we approach it. So, we will be more likely to enjoy the process and have fun if we look at it as gaining useful experience for our profession. And whether or not we got a topic that was our first choice, it's beneficial to focus our mind on the positive aspects of the project and to view any challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. So we want to engage in lots of positive self-talk. That's very important. And we have to remember that the goals that we set need to be attainable, broken into tiny steps, and that we do have ample support, and that one day sooner than later we will be graduating. So this is going to help make this experience more satisfying and rewarding if we can stay positive and thinking of it in that light. Chapter 3 talks about a lot of helpful information on time management and goal setting. So you want to start with goals when you are planning your thesis. So you have to have clearly defined and immediate goals, and you have to break down this huge, enormous project into lots of small projects. So thankfully for us in this program, a lot of the goals are set for us. They're built into our coursework, into our classes. However, within those courses, we are going to have to do goal setting and time management. So we want to list our steps. First, want to sit down and reflect on everything we know about the thesis requirements. And if we don't know all the requirements, we want to make a note of that and jot down what we still need to know. So we want to consider both formal and informal rules when doing this. And we want to start each item in our to-do list with a verb because this implies action. Instead of saying instead of saying participants need to be recruited, we want to say recruit participants because that implies personal responsibility, which we've been learning through the class through the example of Kitty Genovese and the Milgram experiment, that when you have a sense of personal responsibility or lack thereof, it affects your likelihood of action. So we want to stay away from just simply declarative sentences. We want to also watch our language, avoid the word try because that's non-committal, get clear on your intentions. And then there's also backward chaining and forward chaining, which it's kind of a fancy way to put just start backwards or start forwards in your goal mapping. If you start backwards, you're going to work backwards from the last step to the first step. And this is most helpful in the planning stages, especially if you have to be finished by a particular date. Forward chaining may be better suited for when an exact completion date is not a concern, which in our case we know we do have a completion date and it is definitely a concern. So backward chaining may be the best approach there. We also want to be realistic in estimating our time. The text brings out that most students, it didn't just say underestimate, it said grossly underestimate the amount of time it will take to complete their thesis. So when in doubt, we should ask our chair for estimates. So we want to be clear on the time. And then the next step is to schedule the work. So in the textbook on page 37, figure 3.1 shows a Gantt chart, a visual structure for planning. This chart lays out a list of tasks with a visual time window for accomplishing them. This helps make the job clearer and makes you aware of the completeness of your planning. It can also be used as a tool that you use in communicating with others, such as in your thesis group. And there are many spreadsheet and scheduling software packages such as Microsoft Project, Google Docs, Excel, that include Gantt charting and often combine it with project scheduling functions. You also want to refer to the supplemental resources at the end of chapter 3 on how to create a Gantt chart, or you could look up some of the videos on YouTube. There are several. With simple computer scheduling software like this system with this Gantt chart, you can get immediate feedback on what the consequences are if you change plans in your task flow. So when a single value in the data set is changed, the related values automatically recalculate. This can show you the impact on your timeline if you need to go to a getaway just, for mental health reasons, or if you unexpectedly have another interruption or change in your plans. So this will help you realize the full impact of your plans ahead of time. You also want to plan your schedule to free yourself. So the 5 P's, which are prior planning prevents poor performance. The textbook talks about this being inculcated into the author's brain in the Army, and I have been told by this as previous mentors as well. It actually frees you up to enjoy your life more, not less, because it reduces worry and anxiety about how you're going to get it all done. The thesis is only a part of your larger life. So, how and when will you fit it into what is already a pretty full schedule? Well, first, you want to take honest inventory of how you are currently spending your time. There are apps you can download to help you with this. They beep at random times, and you note what you are doing at that moment. The app organizes the data into categories and shows you how much time you're spending on what. So, those 85 minutes a day you're spending on social media or texting friends, it'll keep you honest. Um, so the text also shares that students have fared best when they are able to incorporate their thesis work on a regular basis and really make it part of their daily routine. Once you have this schedule, stick to it. This is a time of self-discipline. Make the steps many and small. So a good rule of thumb is to make them small enough to accomplish in a day or at most a week. Specify the outcome you want to achieve when you put your goals. Don't just say, spend 2 hours reading or read 5 articles. Instead, put read and outline 5 articles. Make sure you put the outcome in the goal. And allow time for social support. This is very important. Spend time with your significant other and with friends. If time with your significant other and or friends is going to be severely limited during certain periods of time, try to discuss this with them in advance when first making your schedule. And this will allow them to make alternative plans, and it will also allow your significant other to feel like they are included and feel empowered rather than feeling negative feelings. And you also want to include them in the making of the schedule itself if possible. Balance is very important here. So getting more done within the time available results less from managing time than it does from managing one's energy, including physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects. So it is very, very important to not just think of things from a time perspective, but from an energy perspective, mental and physical. And then we don't want to procrastinate. It is very easy to do this, but we want to tap into how we're feeling. If we're feeling overwhelmed, we want to, as the text brings out, feeling overwhelmed is a clue that the size of your task doesn't match your energy level. So you want to break your task down into smaller steps until you feel the goal is attainable and adapt it to your day. For example, if you're homesick with a cold and you feel tired, maybe you can't write a coherent discussion section, but maybe you can update your reference list or Gantt chart or touch base with others in your thesis group. Do something. Do not make the mistake of waiting until you have big chunks of time to do the work. And then be careful about self-talk. Don't let it rob you of your confidence. Phrases like, I can't do this, or I'm not smart enough, you want to be aware of that and stay away from that. You also want to be aware of perfectionist thinking. I can't do it, or it isn't perfect. You start to obsess over that and nothing gets written. Just write it, planning for it to be imperfect, and you build in time for revision. If you are a deadline worker, in other words, you can only work when there's a deadline that you're up against, change that now or you'll be in trouble. Either create a series of real and meaningful deadlines or break the deadline habit altogether. You cannot get this thesis done by procrastinating or pulling an all-nighter. It will not work. We want to arrange our schedule according to the PREMAC principle, if this is something that we struggle with. And this is named after the psychologist who popularized it. You do something on your research, then you do something you really want to do or need to do, like sleeping or shopping. This is the behavioral principle behind the first work, then play adage. By doing this, you are strengthening low probability behavior, doing the work, and following it with high probability behavior, sleeping. You want to build rewards also into your research completion schedule. So after turning in the final draft of your proposal, you and your loved one go for a trip. Definitely earned it and deserve it at that point. And you also want to ask members of your social circle for support and to encourage you, and share your progress on social media. If that's not your style, you can use modeling. Modeling is where we all probably know this by now, but you do what you want them to do to you. So if you want your peers to notice your accomplishments, compliment them on their accomplishments. And this approach is practically guaranteed to increase the social reinforcement. And then lastly, take full advantage of communication with your classmates and professional guidance that is available. That summarizes chapter 1 and 3 of the text. Thank you for watching.